Welcome back to Pages into the Past. So today we're going to work on doing a mock-up of a corset because I broke one of the bust knobs on one of my corsets, and I really struggle making corsets. I can make them for other people, fit really well, but when making them for myself, I think I get frustrated and I just go, good enough. So for you guys, I'm going to really try really hard to make this look good. So what we're going to work on is the truly Victorian E01. It's a 1903 Edwardian corset. And because I really am into kind of that Edwardian style right now, I thought it'd be nice to have an Edwardian corset because what I have are Victorian corsets by Truly Victorian and a couple other people. Laughing Moon is one of them. What I did, because I started on this venture quite some time ago and then I put it aside for like 6 months, I already have my pattern pieces traced out, and with that, some of my pattern pieces, they're a little wrinkly. I have to iron them and press them, but I traced them out, and this fabric here is kind of not got a whole lot of stretch. It's got a little bit of stretch. I'm not too worried about that because I'm just going to make up the mock-up and not put the bust in because I want to see if what I measured 6 months ago still fits. So one thing that I did do on all my pattern pieces is I lengthened it 1 inch. And the reason I lengthened it 1 inch is because I'm kind of long-waisted and my belly drops in the front, and so I really want to make sure I get as much support and coverage there as possible. So all my pieces have had 1 inch added to it, and a note that I had left to myself previously said to do the long hip and the short bust. And I think that those were measurements that I had been looking at, as far as sometimes they don't tell you what the different pieces look like. There's one picture, and when there's one picture you don't know A, B, or C. You know, there's 6 options. You could do a high bust, a mid bust, a low bust, short hip, medium hip, long hip. I'm going with long for longer coverage in the torso, and I figure the low bust will give me a little bit more cleavage dip if I need that. So one of the things that we're going to get started on is we're just going to mock up. We're going to cut out our pieces, get them sewn together, and it's a practice run. And I think what I will end up doing is sewing the front together as one seam so that I just have to lace it in the back. I make myself a pair of lacing stays that can be removed and used on any other garment that I need. I put that in my 5-minute videos. Hey, that's a great idea. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to lay them all out. You want to make sure that your grain line is marked on each piece. This has multiple pieces. What I found interesting is that when I was, first of all, make sure that when you do your pieces, make sure they're right side up. I had that marked upside down, and I, for the life of me, couldn't figure out why my everything wouldn't line up. And then, yeah, so just keep your grains up and down. When I was going through, I kept looking at pieces, and I'm like, piece 1, piece 2, piece 3, piece 4, piece 5. Where's piece number 6? Well, I didn't expect piece number 6 to be the hip gore. And so I really had to go back to my pattern and find out what is piece number 6. Like I said before, go back and refer to your pattern and your instruction as often as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and get these all cut out and we'll get started stitching. I have all of my pattern pieces laid out with the exception of the lining of the center back, I think it is. Oh no, the front facing. Front facing I'm not going to do at this point in time because I believe that that's how you secure your busk, and being that I'm going to sew it up the front and this is a 1-layer corset, that I don't need it for my mock-up. Again, I've lengthened this by 1 inch, and I've decided I'm going to start with I'm going to do the low bust cut. So some of the pattern pieces have like a lower V that you can sort of see. This piece here has a low busk, and the reason that I'm going to use the low busk on these is because my busk is 12 inches, and for the mock-up I want to start with 12 inches in case I need to make it longer or taller, and then I can get a longer or taller bust. I have several in my stash, and I'm getting ready to go to costume college, so what better time to try to figure out if I need a longer one, because I believe Richard the Thread will be there. I can pick one up through them, or I can order through Waywack. So I'm going to cut this out, and then I'm just going to do I'm going to sew it together. I'm going to take a peek and see if they have you doing French seam or if you're going to do boning casings. According to the directions, there will be casings for the boning. So I'm just going to stitch this together following the directions and see where it takes me. The back piece, I'm going to go ahead and set the grommets. So there's a center back and a back facing here, and I'm going to go ahead and cut those out so that when I take this apart, I can leave the piece together, cut it down so that both pieces are approximately the same width. And then I'm going to put that away so that I have permanent lacing strips. I'll do a separate video on that for you while I'm doing this. Here I go. Hey guys, just thought I'd show you where I'm at. I've inserted the first 2 bust gores, and these went in relatively smooth. And right now I'm pinning the hip gores, and so the directions tell you to just sew up 1/2 inch seam until about you reach 1/2 inch from the end. And then when you add the second piece, you're going to do the same thing over here, stopping 1/2 inch. Then you will attach the bottom half, stitching upward till you reach that 1/2 inch. And then it says you can clip just a little bit in here. You can see here on the bust gores, I just clipped a little bit so that I could get this to lay better. So what I'm going to do is I will stitch this section, which is the first side of the hip gore piece. I believe it's 5 into 6. And then the next step will be piece 7, and I'll show you what that looks like. All right, guys, I went ahead and sewed part of piece 7 to the lower hip gore. And this is what it looks like at this point in time. So the next step is to sew this section together, and you're going to end just about in the same spot that you ended this seam here, which is about a 1/2 inch before the end of your gore. And then again, you're just going to do little clips here in order to get this to lie flat, unless they have this curving, unless they have you press the whole seam. I will have to read up on that because I believe so. Top stitch, press seam allowances upward. Okay. Well, it doesn't really talk about that side seam there. I'm assuming we're going to press that open. All right. Well, I'm going to keep plugging away here, and yeah, a couple more seams, and I'll be able to put my grommets in. And once the grommets are in, I'll be able to lace it up and try it on. So wish me luck. All right. This is the first mock-up. You can see there's pretty significant gap in the back, but I haven't tried to lace it, tighten it up at all. I've also got no boning except for right here. I think that for the S bend, I've got some room here for my hip pads. This will be a little bit more stiffened for a little bit more form holding here. Not 100% hating it, because like I said, the hip pads will go here. And again, I have a belly. It's not going to disappear because of the kind of corset I'm wearing. But this might help give some more definition here to create more of a waist from front on. So, all right, I think I will use this pattern. I have one adjustment to make, which is on the back inside facing. I forgot to add that extra inch that I did everywhere else. And then it'll have a busk up front, so yeah. All right, guys, so now on to the main event. All right, everybody, so One of the things about making a corset is putting the busk in. And so the directions are pretty straightforward. When you take your busk, you lay it out and you draw a line, skipping each one of the busk pieces, the loops. So when you're done, you'll have marks like so, and what you're going to do is you're going to stitch along, and then you're going to skip over the part where you don't have the mark, and then you'll stitch, do a couple back stitches, skip, back stitch, stitch to the end, and you're just going to do hopscotch so that at the end your fabric will have these spaces in between each mark. Then you're going to turn it through and iron it, and then you will pop this through the open holes. Now I'm putting in a 14-inch busk. You may have to use a shorter one, especially if you're short-waisted. Probably wouldn't have to put too much of a longer one in. Yeah, they just tell you a busk. So the best way to figure out how long of a busk you need is to measure yourself in a seated position from where you want your busk to start until it's just above your lap. That way it doesn't dig into you. Alright, so now that I've got that stitched, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go turn it through, iron it, press it, and then I will pop in the busk to show you how that worked. Alright, so I went ahead and ironed this. So what you're going to do is you're going to open it up, and in your seam here, you're going to find your spaces, which might seem easier said than done. Boy, am I good. Alright, there's one. Alright, so you're going to just kind of push it through, and you want the rivets and the base plate to go to the upside or the outside, not toward the interior side, if that makes any sense to you. Because you're putting it, the facing, you want the most amount of your busk to come through, the metal piece to come through. So I would call that right side up. Alright, so you can see here how that part is done. Alright, I just read the directions, and it looks like what they want you to do is, because this is a single layer corset, they want you to fold it to the inside, encasing the bust, and then you'll stitch it so that you have no raw edge. So that's what we're going to do, and then I'll show you how to do the knob side. Alright, so I don't understand what the folding and encasing and pin it. So what I've decided to do, and because I'm also planning on adding extra boning, I'm going to just turn this edge under just slightly, and I'm going to stitch that down, and then I'm going to also stitch along the busk. And when I measure out the difference between the busk and the stitching line, it looks like there might be about 3/8 of an inch, possibly. If there is, I'm going to stick a piece of boning down in there. Yeah, I am not able to roll this under and keep everything as tight as I want it. As you can see, being pinned in, this is really tight. Once I tried rolling this under, I could not get tight. So maybe next time, but this time I'm just going to go ahead and stitch along my busk line. When I'm done with that, I'm going to roll my edge of my coutil just slightly under so that I can try to get 3/8 of an inch for an extra piece of boning. So, wish me luck! Alright guys, so I'm inserting the knob part of the busk, and what I did is I lined up the busk with the right side and the left side. I marked myself some where the knobs were, and then you're going to use your awl, punch a hole through, turn it over, and wiggle the knob through your awl hole. And if your hole's not big enough, go back and make it a little bit bigger and work that knob through. You're going to repeat this with every knob that you have. You want it to be underneath your knob. So I'm going to finish up the rest of those. And then I will fold this over, stitch it down, and show you when I'm done. Alright guys, here's my busk. I also did a really close stitch along here, all the way down underneath here to keep it from shifting. So now you can put it together. Oh, tell me I didn't do that wrong. Apparently I used the wrong holes. So now I have to take it all apart and shift it. Ding dang, dang it, ding ding. Actually, this is the one that's wrong because it, nope, it should be 2 inches from the bottom on this one. So I gotta redo that. Well, let's try again. Alright, I got that fixed, put together. The little holes, you probably can't see them very well, but those are the old hole. I'm hoping that it'll kind of fade away, but that's the busk and how you do it. Get it lined up there, and there you go. Now later, because it's late, I'm gonna sew the rest of it and then show you what to do when you get it all sewn together and how to add your boning channels. Okay all, we are working on the corset, and right now we are adding the boning channels. And so what they have you do is they have you open up your double fold bias tape and stitch it down the center. And what I'm doing is I'm doing what we call a stitch in the ditch. So here's the seam, and I am stitching through there. You can see here, this is the center of the double fold bias tape, and I have it pinned to the seam here, and that's where I'm going to stitch. Okay, so here's where I did the stitching. When you stitch in the ditch, if you practice enough, you get it fairly close to where you don't really see any of the stitches. So you're going to do that in all the places that they tell you, and as a plus size girl, I'm going to do it in a few extra. So here's the back seam, and I've got the 2 here, and then the front seam, the longest one. And actually I think I did that wrong, because that one should go straight. Okay guys, so what the directions say is when you're doing your bias in the front that you're just going to make straight up and down, and it says it's usually done straight up and down regardless of where the seam lines are. And so I'm going to run, they're showing 4 here. I'll probably start off with 4, and then after I try it on, I'll determine whether or not I need to add more. They say that approximately 3 inches apart for each stay. And so if you start with your busk and your boning there and work your way out to your middle seam, and then your back seam is straight up and down in their casings. May not need as much in the back and the front. Key point is to take it on and off as often as you think that you might need it to determine how much more boning you want. All right, everybody, so I'm working on my corset, and sometimes I like to use the large zip ties. This is one of the large zip ties. You can see it's a little stiff, but this is just about the right size, same size as a boning channel, maybe a little bit wider. Yeah, it's a wee bit wider, not a huge amount. I don't use them very often, but sometimes if I run short, like this corset here has a short piece that's on the hip here. That's about a 6-inch piece, and so I've cut them out to put them inside that boning channel, and they're snug. But one thing that I do is, here's my cutting tool. It's a pair of dog toenail trimmers. One thing that you have to be careful of is, be careful of having it, if you put it this way, sometimes that will get stuck there, or it'll catch on this, and then you'll be fighting it because it won't open. And then sometimes if you hold it too far back, you can pinch your finger or pinch your hand in it. I've done that a time or two. It's very, very painful. What I do is I use it to cut the strip, the length that I need, and then I cut just a little bit off the corners, and then I take an emery board and just file until you get a rounded edge versus a cut off edge. Just makes it a little bit nicer to your body. If it shifts around and starts to dig a little bit, it helps it from cutting through your bias tape or whatever you're using as a boning channel. All right, everybody, here is the version that's done in black. Not all the boning's secured, but for the most part. The back probably can go a little bit tighter. I took my bra off. I'm wearing the wrong shirt, so I'm not getting a lot of lift here. You can see with the pads on underneath, the hip pads, there is some definition here. So I think I'm pretty happy with this, and what I'm going to do is go ahead and seam the top and put the binding in, and then I'm going to put on probably a white shift so you can see it better, because unfortunately this is a little bit harder to see being black, but y'all know I'm a big fan of black. So there's everything there. It's a little high right here, but I think once I get it sewn in that they won't pop up as much. And then of course I think I'll have a different pad underneath. This is one that I just had lying around. The other one that's supposed to go with this is currently packed away for costume college. So we'll see where we go there. So, all right, I'll be back in a few. Okay guys, here we are. The finished corset. I think I might have even impressed myself. Now I have it really tight down here because I tried on the bustle pad that it comes with, and it's very small, and so it doesn't really fit the hips. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to build some that are slender, because the ones I had on earlier were way overstuffed for this corset. But yeah, pretty impressed with this pattern. It's pretty straightforward, no hidden tricks or anything like that. And ta-da! So remember what I always say, keep on sewing. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in 2 weeks. Thank you.